Heathenry, Norse Pagan History and Modern Practices.
So, hello everybody. We are continuing our presentation from last week, where I talked about heathenry, of Norse history, and I touched on what we know about the religious practice of the time. Today, I'm talking about modern practices, the way people are practicing now. We're taking a lot from what's before, and people are creating and discovering new things. So let's explore what it means to be a heathen today and look at the various forms of paganism related to the Norse religion, from Northern Traditional Paganism, Norse Reconstructionism, Asatru,
and Eclectic Paganism. We will talk about some topics of controversy, like Folkism and UPG. Defining the terms. Norse Pagan, Asatru, and Heathen can at times all mean the same thing, and they can each refer to the same person. Asatru is a religious title created in modern day for the religion of the people with faith in the Aesir. The problem is that this only refers to the faith of a subset of the gods. Response titles have been created like Vanatru, Rokatru, Loki Jötunn, and Thorsatru. Another problem with the title Asatru is the word is associated with the Asatru Folk Assembly, the AFA, a group that has taken a very racist approach to the faith. In order to avoid being associated with them, many have moved away from using this title. Norse Pagan is a term to identify others as part of the pagan community, practicing the Norse form of their spirituality. Those who use the term Norse Pagan tend to practice a more eclectic form of paganism, more akin to Wicca than the historic approach of Reconstructionists. Northern Traditional Paganism is a more generic way of saying Norse paganism. Heathen comes from a Germanic word for country dweller, similar to the word pagan. It was used by early Christians to identify the Norse people. Those who use the term heathen tend to practice a more historic approach of Reconstructionists than eclectic paganism. Your hearth cult is a term for their personal approach to the faith in their household, often with a selection of specific gods. Folkism. Are all folkists racist? Folkism is the belief that ancestral ties give benefit, privilege, or access to a religious tradition, especially in lieu of a living culture. Folkism is racist when it equates ancestral ties in lieu of a living culture to race and genetics. Folkism in heathenry is the idea that the religion is centered around an ancestral connection, and the celebration of that ancestral connection is only possible if you have the right ancestors. This idea is the cornerstone of the racist heathen groups like the Asatru Folk Assembly, AFA. In response to the greater heathen and pagan community, the greater heathen and pagan community created Declaration 127. Quote, "When you see misdeeds, speak out against them, and give your enemies no frith. Have 'em all. 127. The AFA's views do not represent our community. We hereby declare that we do not condone hatred or discrimination carried out in the name of our religion, and will no longer associate with those who do. We will not grant the tacit approval of silence in the name of Frith. To those who would use our traditions to justify prejudice on the basis of race, nationality, orientation, or gender identity, the AFA is free to stand for whatever principle it sees fit. They are free to stand alone. End quote. That's a major part of Declaration 127. Groups that openly support Declaration 127 and register and be listed on their website. This is a good place to look for organizations while you are considering affiliation. If they're not listed, you should probably ask further questions. Finding balance. Reconstructionism and Eclectic Paganism. Reconstructionism attempts to construct a faith based on historic evidence. For heathenry, it is very difficult to get a complete picture of how the Norse religious practices were conducted. Very little knowledge is complete, and some aspects may never be known. Eclecticism is a personalized faith based on personal experiences, often blending different faiths. It's the take what you like and leave the rest method. There are clear benefits and drawbacks to both approaches, and I find the best approach is to find a balance of using both types, is to form a balance to make a more complete picture. Personal Gnosis. Faith includes personal experiences and understanding, commonly called personal Gnosis. UPG, unverified personal Gnosis, is any non-transferable personal experience, sometimes referring to divinely revealed knowledge. UPG is true for that person, but not necessarily true for everyone. SPG, shared personal Gnosis. When UPG is shared and agreed upon, SPG is not necessarily true, but it is more likely to be. VPG, verified personal Gnosis. VPG in polytheistic cases usually refers to SPG that is supported by historical examples or evidence. VPG is also not necessarily true, but even more so likely. Multiple historic accounts can often contradict each other. In conclusion, Gnosis, or religious knowledge, or truth, is hard to know. Not all UPG are messages from the gods, and even if they are, gods can lie. It may be a message for you, and not necessarily an absolute truth for everyone. Examples of various personal gnosis in heathenry: that Freya likes chocolate and or strawberries. Thor likes coffee, especially strong coffee. And Odin likes whiskey. Sandalwood incense is pleasing to most of the gods. The cats that pull Freya's chariot are named Beigel and Tregel. This is the only way we can learn the names and characteristics of little-known gods and spirits. Personal Gnosis can also include how you worship. You will learn how to communicate with the gods.
How do you make sacrifices? And who do you feel the greatest connection with? And that leads to developing your own hearth cult. So ask questions, listen and learn. Be willing to change your views. Developing of your hearth cult is never a static thing. It's not, I've got this information and it's done. It is a part of your growth and your process of exploring and learning. So read and read some more. Develop personal relationships with other people in the faith and with the divine. Consider developing relationships with your ancestors, with spirits, and your invisible neighbors, as we referred to last week, and with the gods. It is, for many people, it's useful to develop a process of meditation, to be mindful and to pay attention. It's very hard to get messages if you're still trying to speak. You need to listen. And a very useful topic as you're developing your hearth cult is to start journaling. Write down your experiences so you can reflect on them, because in the reflections oftentimes is the revelation, not necessarily coming to a complete understanding at the instance. So I'm going to go through now an overview of the gods and other beings associated with heathenry. When developing your own practices, it could be overwhelming to try to include all the gods in your hearth cult as your divine patrons. There's so many of them, and there are some conflicts. Start by developing your own relationship with the gods, one at a time. Consider the gods that interest you, but also start by meditating on each one and see if any of them speak to you. This is a personal journey, so there's no inherent wrong ways. But we're going to talk about some best practices. So the following is a list of some of the many possible divine patrons. Consider this an incomplete list of the gods. The gods are organized into groups, like family clans. The primary group we are familiar with is the Aesir. The Vanir group is a group of gods associated with fertility, wisdom, and the ability to see the future. They were at one time at war with the Aesir, but came together in peace. I'm going to touch on a lot of myth and lore. That's something for you to study more into. I'm just giving you a bunch of flavors, a bunch of key points for you to start to look up later. The Jötunn, they're the giants of myth, but can be many sizes and have many different abilities. So let's go to fly through a list of them. Let me introduce you to Odin, the Allfather. He was involved in creating the world and creating the first humans, along with his brothers Vili and Vi. He sacrificed his eye for wisdom and sacrificed himself for power and the runes. Frigg, his wife, goddess associated with marriage, fidelity, prophecy, clairvoyance, and motherhood. Thor, son of Odin, the foremost of the Aesir, strongest of the gods and men, and a protector of them both. Sif, his wife, golden-haired goddess associated with the harvest. Balder, second son of Odin, sometimes referred to, but we're not sure how many sons Odin actually has. We're not going to try to count. He is best known for being loved by all and how he dies. So look that one up yourself. Tyr, the one-handed, also referred to as the god Tiwaz and associated with that rune. Patron of warriors and mythical heroes. By the way, we're now in the Vanir. Freyr, twin of Freya, the god also referred to as Ingwaz. God associated with nature, fertility, sex, and crop fertility. Freya, twin, goddess associated with love, beauty, fertility, sex, war, god, gold, and Seder. Norther, he's the father of Freyr and Freya, god associated with the sea, seafaring, wind, fishing, wealth, and crop fertility. He is married to Skadi, which we will talk to about later. Hemdal, god who keeps watch for invaders. Hemdal is a god who keeps watch for invaders and the onset of Ragnarok. And he's the father of the three classes of men. Uller, god associated with archery. Very little has been preserved about him, but he is listed as one of the many gods. Loki, he is sometimes an honorary Aesir, but I'm listing him under the Jötunn. He is the blood brother to Odin, so he gained that. He's associated with chaos, lies, and trickery, but many other aspects. Offspring of Loki, we're going to go Hel, goddess associated with death and the ruler of Helheim. Then Fenrir, another offspring of Loki, of adversary of the gods and the killer of Odin. Jormungandr, offspring of Loki, world serpent and killer of Thor. And Sleipnir, offspring of Loki as well, greatest of the horses, carries Odin. With his 8 legs, he has the ability to travel between worlds. Skadi, goddess associated with bow hunting, ski, winter, and mountains, marries Norther. Utgard Loki, ruler of the castle in Utgarda in Jotunheim. It was a trickster and master of illusion. In his court, Thor and Loki meet Logi, the personification of wildfire, Hugi, the personification of thought, and Eli, the personification of old age. And there are many, many other entities. The Norns, the 3 primary Norns are Weird, Verthandi, and Skull. They spin the threads of fate at the feet of Yggdrasil. They also draw water from the sacred well in order to nourish the tree and prevent it from rotting. Kvasir was an entity born from the saliva of the Aesir and the Vanir at the conclusion of their war. Extremely wise, he traveled the world spreading knowledge until a couple dwarves killed him and created the mead of poetry. Jord, mother of Thor, unknown alignment, maybe Vanir, maybe Jötunn, but is definitely a goddess personification of earth. And Dis, plural Disir, are female spirits or deities, wisdom. There are many of them. Some of them are female ancestors. Some are considered deities, ghosts, or spirits associated with fate, who can be either benevolent or antagonistic towards mortals. Disir may act as protective spirits of Norse clans.
Elves. There are light elves and the dark elves. The light elves live in Elfheim. Their fair complexion and beauty to behold. Dark elves live underground, have a dark complexion, and they may be actually dwarves under another name. Dwarves, they live underground, dark complexion. They are the finest of craftsmen, able to craft magical objects. And there are 4 dwarves holding up the 4 corners of the sky. And there are other spirits, guardians of places, spirits of the home, and other fae entities. Beware of trolls. And now consider your own ancestors, the ancient ancestors, but also the more recent, dearly departed. You may also consider respected people in your life who have passed, or people from history. They don't have to be directly related to you. We are all generally related.
Communicating with the divine. The Norns are responsible for shaping the course of human history, human destinies. So the three Norns spin the thread, as we talked about, beneath Yggdrasil. The practice of Seder is the form of magic which is related to both the telling and shaping of the future. So this could be part of the tools you try to develop in your hearth cult. Seder could be thought of as communicating with the Norns, reading the threads, and perhaps influencing how they are woven next. We talked about Odin, who sacrificed himself to himself by hanging himself on Yggdrasil. But by doing this, he was able to draw up the runes. So after 9 days and nights, he looked down and to the well, drew up the runes, gaining him the power associated with those. There's magical spells that can be done with the runes, and it's a major part of his power. So the runes were a written language of the Old Norse. They are found and preserved in manuscripts and on stones. Each rune is not just a letter with a sound in the Futhark, that's alphabet, but also has its own meaning. So taking up the runes gave Odin wisdom and magic. So you might want to take up the runes yourself. Runes are used for both magic and divination. One way we can communicate with the divine is through the runes. There are many ways to divine with runes. The simplest way is to simply ask a question and draw a rune from a rune set. Rune sets are commonly found on stone today, and there are descriptions of them on wood discs in the ancient times. Before you can start casting lots with runes, you must familiarize yourself with them. So there's a lot of study involved in that. Real rune divination is greater than the literal meaning of the runes. It includes your interpretation and relating to the message to yourself. So runes are the letters of a language. The language has changed over time, and so there are many different sets of runes. The oldest that we have documentation for is we refer to as the Elder Futhark. And those are the runes I'm depicting for you here on the slide.
That was an overview of heathenry and modern practices. Continue learning. I have a long list of the sources that I've pulled on and used to learn the things that I've shared today, including authors Jackson Crawford, Neil Gaiman, Galina Kraskova, Patricia M. Lefebvre, Daniel McCoy, Stephen Pullington, Ryan Smith, and Ben Wagner. I also found a lot of content on YouTube from creators Ocean Keltoy, Arith Hardner, Jackson Crawford, and some from the Grimfrost Academy. Websites I pulled from: Declaration 127, Norse Mythology for Smart People, ThoughtCo, and Nordic Culture. Please share your own personal gnosis, questions, or anything else. We'll try to answer, or we can find the answers together. Thank you.
Amethyst, you have your hand up.
I, as Wiccan, tend to be drawn to the goddesses, but I have to say that my introduction to the Norse path, I am very intrigued by the gods, the Norse gods, Thor, Odin, Baldar, and such. And I thank you for all of that information because, like I said, I tend to think in terms of goddesses, but it's nice to be able to relate to gods too.
There are more goddesses in the Norse pantheon. Very few of them have been as well documented as the gods, but that's a reflection of the later cultures, more so than the original cultures, the way they had a great understanding for it. So that's a lot of the information that we are rebuilding if you choose to recognize other people's personal gnosis.
I'm kind of curious to see how the bloat turned out, Brúnn. First, we light to the sun. Then, we light to the Father. And third, we light to the sage. Fourth, we light to the maiden. Fifth, we light to the mother. Then we light to the crone. Next, we light to the child. Then we light to the hunter. And from them all, the wise one has been lit. So those are the 9 candles that I light.
Another major practice I want to touch on as you're developing your own hearth cult in heathenry are the bloats. So bloat is basically a sacrifice, but in modern heathenry they've become basically like our holidays, and many of the bloats are associated with the full moon, so they come on a lunar cycle rather than necessarily tied to the wheel of the year, but the lunar cycle is still in that. And I recently did a bloat together with Birch, and it was alpha bloat, so it was honoring our male ancestors. Birch, is there anything you would like to say on bloats and how you practice them?
Yeah, I'm actually going to give a lot of information on this in January when I do Deezer bloat.
Okay.
But really the concept of bloat, just to summarize and preview, it's an exchange and it's a sacrifice. It's tied to the idea that in order to continue with our lives and our year and our prosperity, we are going to ask things of the gods, of the spirits, of our ancestors. And so at a bloat, you take the opportunity to give back. Historically, you might sacrifice, your cattle, or animals, and there were some large ones where there were a lot of other sacrifices made, both human or animal. But it's because of that idea of the even exchange, that what you give should be equal to what you are asking for. Timothy, Stephen, William,
Kevin,
fathers to sons, all the way back to we who approach the dark of winter, we who approach the still of night, we call to you, fathers and sons, grandfathers and great-grandfathers, and grandfathers beyond grandfathers, all the grandfathers whose names we do not know or remember, but who live on in us back 1,000 generations. We call to you and we ask your blessing in exchange for this, a night of remembrance. We recall to you, we honor you, we speak to you. Let all the fathers of fathers of fathers be honored and blessed as they have lived, as they have died. May the luck of our families and our lives be ever strengthened, be ever greater down the lines. For we too stand at just one point in time. We look ahead of us, there stretch endless more generations down the line. Uncles to nephews, nephews and other nephews and uncles, for all that comes from the line.
Birch, maybe you can share with us the importance of singing as part of this
Yeah.
ritual. I think it's something different than some of the others.
Yes. So there's a lot of this can go back to historical reconstruction. There's a lot of ideas linking the practice of Seidr, the magic, with song. A lot of the spells fall into a 5-beat chant, and the words for music and for magic are very closely tied in the Norse and Germanic languages. So like chant versus enchantment as well. So when I practice Seidr, I do it through music and song and chant as a way to directly channel the magic. Lothan, Father, you who lead these hunts through these dark and cold nights, hear us. Hear us as we celebrate. Hear us as we gather. Hear us as we come together to honor those male ancestors, they who have come before. Utierda, Mother, Mother who is the earth below our feet, Mother who is the ground we walk on, Mother who is the ground we sleep beneath when we close our eyes for one last time. Mother, you who hold in your bosom they who have gone before, our ancestors, be with us, be welcome at this gathering, be welcome at this celebration, be welcome at this float as we honor they who have come and gone before. Winds of the north. Winds of the north. Winds of the north, be with us here in this place and in this hour. Winds of the north, I call to you to be with us in this place and in this hour. Hear us as we welcome you to this place. We seek your tidings, O winds of the north. Tell us what is to come in these months to be. Tell us, tell us, tell us true, O winds of the north. I can really hear that wind howling out there. Seeing this now, it's kind of creepy the way that the sage candle like dimmed as soon as I bowed and then it came up again. There were some very interesting moments because at the start of it for divination, I called to the four winds to carry the messages that I was divining with the cards. And so throughout the rest of the night, we would just get these random bursts of wind, like through the patio. And almost all of the 3 candles for the ladies burned out. But we somehow had the sage, and the 3 for the non-binary lasted the longest. Like the ladies were kind of bowing out and letting the men have their turn.
Which is very appropriate considering that the alpha bloat, it's talking about the male ancestors.
Yeah. So I'll be curious to see what happens during Dieser Bloat.
I look forward to it.
I don't know if I'll call up a win that time.